It should have been impossible to forget a warrior like him. Yet in the quiet outskirts of a town called Meridian Bluff, Master Gunnery Sergeant Elias Creed stood motionless beside a cracked granite obelisk, an outdated war memorial rarely visited even by locals. A Silver Star and Navy Cross recipient, Creed didn't draw attention to himself. His presence was a vigil, not a statement, eyes shadowed with memory, posture disciplined, silent as the heat-shimmered air. The townspeople didn't see a hero. They saw a silent figure too near their monument. Suspicion grew. But Creed wasn't there for them. He was retracing the final trail of a fallen teammate, Staff Sergeant Lin Tran, and K9 Echo, his last true bond. Creed's boots were planted in dusty gravel, unmoved even as the wind teased his salt and pepper hair and tugged at the faded collar of his service jacket. He didn't flinch when the screen door of the cafe slammed behind a nervous waitress, nor when the sheriff's cruiser crawled past the intersection for a third time. The names carved on the obelisk, some already fading, held no meaning for the new generation. But for Creed, they were anchors. Reminders. Echoes. Tran had spoken of Meridian Bluff like it was a final promise. A place where, if the end came, he hoped his ashes would rest. He never got that wish. Official channels lost his remains in transit. Echo was declared non-recoverable. But Creed had a letter, a torn, sweat-stained scrap mailed 2 weeks before Tran's last mission. It mentioned this town, and the ridge that overlooked it. So Creed came. He carried no banner, gave no speech. His medals stayed boxed. The war didn't need retelling. He stood instead as a sentinel. For Tran. For Echo. For all that went unsaid. Creed had known war in all its forms. From the frozen highlands of the Karengal Valley to the scorched alleys of Marja, he had fought with resolve, commanded with precision, and endured with silent dignity. He was not the loudest, nor the most decorated, but his record whispered a legacy, one built on watching over his men and finishing the mission, no matter the cost. When Staff Sergeant Lin Tran and the Belgian Malinois codenamed Echo were assigned to his unit, it didn't take long for bonds to form. Creed didn't trust easily. But Tran didn't force anything. He simply showed up, every day, ready. Echo, lean and dark-eyed, moved like a ghost and hit like thunder. He was a combat K9 with over a dozen successful operations under his vest, trained to detect IEDs, intercept targets, and guard with lethal devotion. But in Tran's care, Echo was more than a weapon, he was a brother. The three of them, Creed, Tran, and Echo, operated like one breath. By the end of their second deployment together, they didn't speak strategy anymore, a glance was enough. Creed would later admit, in the isolation of retirement, that those were the only two he ever allowed close enough to become family. Their last mission was supposed to be a civilian extraction, standard risk, minimal resistance. But operations in the Kandahar outlands never stayed simple. The team was ambushed in a marketplace. In the chaos, Tran spotted a child frozen near a blast site and didn't hesitate. Creed screamed his name through the comms, but Tran had already sprinted out of cover. He reached the boy, barely, before the secondary IED detonated. Echo threw himself over both of them. When the dust cleared, Tran was barely breathing. Echo was gone. Or so they were told. Creed didn't cry when Tran bled out beside him in the field hospital. He held his hand. Whispered a Marine's prayer. And when they told him Echo's body was unrecoverable, he didn't scream. He filed reports. Pushed through the red tape. Demanded records, shipment logs, satellite imagery, anything that would contradict the convenient label of equipment lost in transfer. But the system was indifferent. Echo had no next of kin, no burial flag. Just a serial number. After 6 months of inquiries, Creed got a polite letter saying the case was closed. The line was final, all relevant assets have been accounted for or respectfully decommissioned. He retired early. Not in disgrace, but in quiet fury. The Corps had been his life for over 2 decades. But when family was treated as inventory, it lost its meaning. Still, he couldn't let go. Months passed in restless silence. He spent nights rereading Tran's last letter, a brief note scrawled during downtime between patrols. Most of it was jokes, gripes about Chow, news about his sister's engagement. But one paragraph stuck. If things go south, promise me something, Creed. Don't let them bury me in a marble cube. Not if Echo goes with me. There's this ridge in a place called Meridian Bluff, in the States. My folks used to take me there as a kid. I always thought if I vanished, that's where I'd want to rest. Not Arlington. Not ashes in an urn. Just that spot. Just quiet. Creed read those words like scripture. The Corps didn't grant him access to Tran's remains, and his family, swallowed by paperwork and grief, had stopped responding. But the letter had its own pull. A direction. It was winter when he drove cross-country with a rucksack, a folded flag, and Tran's photo wrapped in cloth. Meridian Bluff was a ghost on most maps, but he found it, nestled between forgotten hills and a rail line that hadn't seen a train in years. He stood at the edge of the ridge Tran had described, wind cutting across his face. There was no marker, no monument. Just sky and silence. He buried the letter beneath the largest stone and whispered the last rites again. He didn't leave town. Something in him resisted the notion of simply walking away. Days passed. He kept to the edge of the community. Slept in his truck. Shaved with cold water. Observed. Not for threats, there were none, but for signs. Hints. An inexplicable pull. It came unexpectedly. A grainy local newspaper clip folded into a library book. A mention of a retired police dog reassigned from overseas service, housed temporarily by a government handler. The name was clinical, Cerberus. No details. But the photo, hard to see, showed a scar above the eye. Echo had one, from Kandahar. Creed drove to the address listed in the article. Found it fenced, locked. Government property. He didn't try to break in. He didn't need to. Just seeing the shape through the chain link, alert ears, proud stance, the way the head tilted when he approached the perimeter, was enough. The system hadn't destroyed Echo. It had repurposed him. That night, Creed returned to the monument at the edge of town. He stood there not just for Tran, but for Echo, waiting. Watching. Hoping the stillness might summon clarity. Locals noticed him. A man like that, unmoving and silent, stirred questions. They didn't know his name, only that he was always there before dawn and long after dusk. A few thought him dangerous. Others just thought him broken. But Creed wasn't there to explain himself. He was waiting for the moment the past would catch up to the present. For recognition. For reckoning. At first, his presence was merely strange. A silent man in his 60s standing daily beside the old war memorial didn't exactly scream danger, but in a town like Meridian Bluff, quiet, private, and carved from habit, strange didn't last long before it turned to suspicion. People talked. They speculated. Nobody remembered inviting him, and nobody liked not knowing. Mrs. Hargrove, owner of the town cafe, watched Creed often through the front window. She'd lost her only son, Matt, in Iraq back in '06. No body. No closure. Just a triangle folded flag and government condolences. So when she saw Creed lingering near the monument day after day, his stillness stirred something bitter. To her, the war memorial was sacred. The stranger's presence felt invasive, almost accusatory. She finally made the call. Chief Deputy Halvorsen arrived the next morning, a long-limbed man with a rigid jawline and a fondness for doing things by the book. With him came Marshal Deeks, young, proud, and armed with textbook protocol. They parked on the gravel shoulder and approached. Creed didn't move. He stood as he always had, hands folded, face unreadable, eyes fixed on the cracked stone slabs. Halvorsen cleared his throat. "Sir, we've had some concerns about your presence. Mind telling us your business here?" Creed turned his head slowly. "Paying respects." Deke stepped forward. "We'll need identification." "Don't need papers to mourn," Creed replied. Halvorsen's brow furrowed. "We're not trying to cause trouble, but folks are uncomfortable. If you're just here to honor someone, we'd appreciate some clarification. You're making people nervous." Creed's jaw tensed. "I'm not trespassing. This is public ground." "That may be," Deke said, adjusting his belt, "but we need to verify who you are." Creed didn't budge. "You'll have to do that without me." Halvorsen radioed in for backup. Not because Creed was threatening, he wasn't, but because unpredictability demanded precaution. Within minutes, another unit arrived, bringing Officer Torres and AK-9. The dog emerged from the vehicle with sharp alertness, dark fur, lean build, tactical harness. Creed's eyes locked on it. The scar above the right eye. Echo. He felt the breath catch in his chest. The dog stared at him, head tilting just slightly. Recognition flickered, subtle but there. Creed didn't speak. Didn't move. Just watched. "Cerberus, heel," Torres ordered. The dog held position, but his ears flicked. Tension quivered in the leash. Creed's fingers twitched. Halvorsen didn't notice. "Sir, one last time, produce identification or we'll be forced to remove you." Creed's voice was low, flat. "I'm not going anywhere." Deeks reached for the cuffs. Across the street, a little girl named Ava stood frozen, holding her grandfather's hand. Samuel Reyes was a retired Navy corpsman, quiet and steady, rarely seen without his old tan cap. They had stopped for ice cream. Ava had noticed the man first. "Pop," she said, tugging. "That's the guy from your picture. The one with the dog." Reyes squinted. "What? You showed me, remember? The soldier and the black dog. From your convoy." Reyes looked again. His expression changed. It was him. Before Deeks could step closer, Reyes was already moving. "Hold up," he called. "That man's no drifter." Halvorsen turned. "Do you know him?" "His name's Elias Creed. Marine. Silver Star. I met him in Helmand. That dog, he saved a lot of lives. Including mine." The officers hesitated. Then came the SUV. It rolled up in silence, sleek and black, windows tinted. When the door opened, a woman in fatigues stepped out, decorated, decisive. Lieutenant Colonel Yara Bennett. Joint Special Operations Command. She showed her credentials without delay. "That man is Master Gunnery Sergeant Creed," she said firmly. "He's here under quiet reconsecration authorization. You're to stand down. Immediately." Halvorsen blinked. "Reconsecration? It's a classified designation," Bennett said. "Private recovery, personal discretion, limited disclosure. You don't need the details." She turned to Creed. "We got your last request." Echo was reassigned as Cerberus through a logistical error. "We've traced the files. You were right. He's yours." Creed nodded, eyes locked on the dog. The trembling in Echo's legs was visible now. Silent emotion pressed behind those dark eyes. Creed spoke one word. "Echo." The dog whimpered. Everyone froze. The whimper cut through the silence like a forgotten melody, one only two beings in the crowd recognized. Creed dropped to a knee without command, body moving on instinct before thought. "Echo, he said again, quieter this time, as if coaxing memory from beneath layers of training. The dog twitched. His legs shifted, muscles uncertain, ears pivoting toward the voice that knew his name before the world called him something else. Torres tightened the leash. Cerberus, heel. The dog whined now, louder. He didn't heel. He stared, frozen, caught between command and connection. I said heel. Let go, Creed said, not to Torres, but to Echo. The leash went taut. The dog strained forward once, twice, and then a sound escaped him, somewhere between cry and growl. He lunged, not to attack, but to reach. The leash slipped. Echo ran full speed into Creed's arms, knocking the older man back into the dirt. Creed didn't resist. He took the impact like a wave he'd longed for. Echo buried his face in Creed's chest, whimpering deep, broken sounds as if trying to speak in the only way a soldier without words could. Creed wrapped his arms around him and whispered, I know, boy. I kept my word. I'm here. No one moved. Torres stood stunned, leash dangling. Bennett gave her a single nod, not of blame, but permission to stay quiet. Halvorsen slowly lowered his hand from his belt. Deeks, mouth open, took an unconscious step backward. He'd seen dogs obey, seen dogs trained to perfection. He'd never seen one fall into someone's arms like this. Not in grief. Not in recognition. Samuel Reyes approached, hat in hand. He moved like someone walking into church. Not toward Creed, but toward the memorial. His fingers brushed the chipped granite lightly. You remember the blast in Helmand, '09, he asked aloud, not to anyone in particular. Creed didn't answer. Still kneeling, still holding Echo. I was in the 4th Humvee, Reyes went on. When the lead went up, our convoy stalled. Taliban fighters zeroed in. We were dead in the dirt, until that dog and his handler cleared the path. He turned around now. Echo and Tran. They saved us. I saw them drag a man 3 times their size back behind the barrier. Reyes gestured to the girl beside him. My granddaughter knows the story. We tell it every Veterans Day. Didn't think we'd see the end of it in person. Mrs. Hargrove stepped out of her cafe, uncertain. She'd heard everything. The gunmetal weight in her chest hadn't left since the first time Creed stood beside the stone. It shifted now. Something in her gaze softened. My son mentioned a K9 once, she murmured. Said he owed his life to one, back in Najaf. Could have been Echo. Deeks turned red, eyes flicking between Bennett and Halvorsen, as if waiting to be corrected. No one spoke. Creed finally stood, hands still on Echo's back. The dog remained close, pressed against his leg. Bennett cleared her throat. The Department of Defense mishandled Echo's decommissioning, she said to the gathered crowd. He was labeled equipment and reassigned without regard to emotional bond or proper exit protocol. Creed filed multiple objections. They were ignored. And now? Halvorsen asked quietly. Now he's being returned. You can do that? Deeks asked. Just, give him the dog? Bennett met his gaze. No. But sometimes the system forgets who it's supposed to serve. And when it does, it gets reminded. The K9 handler, Torres, knelt near Echo. She wasn't upset, just humbled. He never warmed up to me, she admitted. Obeyed, sure. But never trusted. Not like this. She removed the tactical vest from Echo's body. Unstrapped the collar labeled Cerberus, Tactical K9. Handed them both to Creed without a word. The moment should have ended there. But Ava stepped forward, her tiny fingers brushing the matted fur on Echo's side. He's not a weapon, she said. He's a promise. Creed looked at her. The crowd looked at each other. And slowly, the misunderstanding began to reverse itself. People who had once crossed the street to avoid him now took hesitant steps forward. A farmer in overalls offered a thermos of water. A high school teacher brought a blanket from her truck. Someone set down a bottle of peroxide and bandages. Mrs. Hargrove, holding a tray of muffins, stepped forward last. Her voice trembled. "For what it's worth. I'm sorry." Creed took a long breath and nodded once. That evening, Creed stayed by the monument, sitting instead of standing. Echo lay at his feet, dozing, belly rising and falling. The leash was gone. There was no need for one anymore. Across the street, lights flickered in the windows of the cafe. Ava sat on the counter drawing a picture with crayons. The sun dipped low behind the hills Tran had once written about. Inside the cafe, Samuel Reyes dialed a number he hadn't used in years. When the call connected, his voice was clear. "I need to report a reunion. A real one." Somewhere far off, redacted emails began to stir. Back by the obelisk, Bennett sat beside Creed, silence passing like an understood salute between them. "Why didn't you just go public?" she asked. Creed didn't look away from Echo. "Because it wasn't about the fight. It was about the promise. And now? Now it's about making sure no one forgets." Echo stirred, pressing closer. His scars, like Creed's, told a story no paperwork ever could. And Meridian Bluff, once unsure, began to remember. Creed didn't sleep that night. Echo curled beside him under the memorial's shadow, letting out small noises as if dreaming. The war was never fully gone, not for man or dog, but this quiet. It was the closest they'd come to peace in years. When dawn broke over Meridian Bluff, Creed rose, stretching joints stiff from sleep on hard ground. Echo stood too, tail low, steady at his side. They climbed the ridge at sunrise. This was Tran's place, the one he'd described in the letter, the one Creed had promised. At the top, the wind moved like breath between pine trees, and the world seemed to pause for them. Creed knelt and unpacked a small wooden box. Inside were Tran's dog tags, a scrap of his last letter, and a pinch of ash, retrieved quietly from a friend in logistics. No ceremony. Just earth, hands, and memory. He buried the contents beneath a flat stone he'd carved the day before. One word etched with a pocket knife, "Brother." Echo sat beside it, alert and still. "You're home," Creed whispered. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. Back in town, news had traveled faster than any of them expected. Ava's mother had filmed Echo's reunion with Creed. It was supposed to be for family. But the internet had its own agenda. The video spread in hours. A soldier calling softly, a dog breaking free of leash and command, rushing to collapse into familiar arms. The rawness struck a nerve. By the next day, #EchoReturns was trending. Veterans forums, dog handlers, military families, everyone was talking. Some told their own stories of lost K9s. Others demanded reform. And somewhere, officials noticed. The Department of Defense issued a brief statement: "We are reviewing decommissioned K9 policies." It meant nothing, but it was something. Yet in Meridian Bluff, it meant everything. A bouquet appeared at the memorial. Then two. Then a framed photo. A high school art student painted a mural, Creed and Echo in silhouette, overlooking a battlefield only they understood. Reyes, the old corpsman, started organizing a cleanup crew to restore the memorial. Mrs. Hargrove added Echo's treats to the cafe menu, blueberry muffins shaped like paws. People changed. Chief Deputy Halvorsen came by without his uniform, hat in hand. He didn't speak much, but he did leave something, a folded article, yellowed and worn. Title: K9 saves 3 in Helmand ambush. No names. Just a note scrawled at the bottom, might have been him. Thanks. And Creed? He asked for nothing. He didn't attend town meetings or interviews. He simply remained near the memorial during the day, then walked the edge of town with Echo at night. The two moved like they had always belonged to this place. Echo adjusted quickly, he played with kids, rested beneath porch swings, even wagged his tail at Ava when she rode past on her bike. But he always returned to Creed. Always. Late one afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Bennett returned, this time in civilian clothes. She stepped out of a plain vehicle with no fanfare. She walked up the path alone. Creed met her gaze with a nod. "They're finalizing the transfer," she said. "Echo's yours, officially. Lifetime custody. No conditions." Creed gave no reaction, but his hand drifted down to Echo's back. The dog leaned against him slightly. Bennett continued, "The panel reviewed everything. They're calling it a priority imprint. Echo chose. It couldn't be ignored." Creed finally spoke. "Should have never been questioned." She sighed. "No. But maybe now it won't be again." He gave her a look, not harsh, not accusing. Just real. "They only listen when it goes viral." "True," she admitted. "But sometimes change needs a spark." She pulled something from her coat pocket. A small tag, stainless steel, engraved with Echo's name, and Creed's. "They wanted to send a plaque," she said. "I figured this made more sense." Creed took it, fingers brushing the lettering. He clipped it onto Echo's collar, replacing the one labeled Cerberus. The sound it made, a soft, metal click, was like a promise kept. That evening, people gathered by the memorial. There was no program, no speeches, just presence. A welder from down the road had made a new plaque, steel, clean, and simple. It read, "For Elias Creed and K9 Echo. Loyalty beyond rank. Service beyond duty." No anthem played. No flag was raised. Ava climbed the step near the base of the obelisk. In her hand, a crayon drawing, Creed and Echo beneath a tree, a small stone between them. "This is them," she said to the gathered crowd. They remembered when no one else did. No one clapped. They didn't need to. Creed stood back, Echo beside him. In their stillness, the town finally saw. Not a stranger. Not a statue. But a story, unfinished no longer. The morning after the gathering, the plaque still gleamed in the early sun. Fresh footprints and wilted flowers surrounded its base. The wind carried voices now, soft laughter, names spoken with care, stories revisited by people who had once forgotten how to tell them. Creed visited just before dawn, as he always did, Echo at his side. They didn't linger. The plaque had said what needed saying. Now it was time to move forward, not from the past, but with it. Word of their story continued to ripple outward. News crews tried to descend, but were met with polite refusal. The town had found its line between reverence and spectacle. "This isn't a zoo," Mrs. Hargrove told one eager journalist. "This is about remembrance." The footage of Echo's reunion with Creed still circulated, but the frenzy had slowed. In its place, reflection took root. Creed still said little, but his presence began to evolve. He took early morning walks along the rail bed with Echo. Ava sometimes joined them, riding her bike in slow loops. She'd ask questions, some sharp, some silly, and Creed answered when he could. "Did Echo ever save you?" "Every day." "Did you ever get scared?" "Only when it mattered." "Did Tran love Echo like you do?" "He was his first home." Creed didn't offer more than was asked. But Ava, in her gentle persistence, pulled pieces of his soul into daylight. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was just bearing witness. That was enough. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the Department of Defense, this time not addressed to Creed, but to the town. It came with a manila packet, proposal for a pilot initiative, veteran K-9 reconsolidation program. Modeled after the events surrounding Master Gunnery Sergeant Elias Creed and military working dog Echo, it proposed permanent bonds between handlers and service dogs when eligible. Attached was a request: would Elias Creed be willing to consult? No, he said at first. Then paused. Not as an advisor. Reyes raised an eyebrow. Then what? As a field man. Quiet. Direct. No red tape. I've lived it. They don't need theory. They need truth. Bennett, who had stayed in touch from a new post in D.C., arranged for it. Not as a job. As a calling. Creed wouldn't be wearing a suit. He wouldn't be lecturing in conference rooms. He'd travel. Visit handlers. Quiet reunions. Clean up the mess the system didn't know how to clean. Echo would go with him. But before they could leave, something else happened. It began with a letter. Then 3 more. Then over 100. They came from across the country, former handlers, families of fallen soldiers, old commanders, even children of veterans. Some were just thanks. Some held stories. Some asked for help. Echo received pawprint stamps and hand-knitted bandanas. One girl from Iowa sent her allowance with a note, for Echo's snacks, because heroes get hungry. Creed read every letter. He didn't reply to all. But he saved each one in a wooden box beneath the seat of his truck. They installed a new bench beside the memorial. Etched into the back. Some heroes return quietly. Some howl when they find home. On the day Creed and Echo prepared to leave town, the entire cafe staff gathered outside. Ava brought a shoebox filled with travel snacks for the road, biscuits for Echo, jerky for Creed. Reyes handed over an old compass, its glass cracked but still accurate. "You'll need it," he said. "But not for direction. For remembering which way not to go back." Even Halvorsen showed up, offering a handshake Creed took without pause. "You made me rethink a lot," the deputy admitted. "About what we owe people like you." Creed only said, "Then you owe it forward." The truck was packed modestly. A tarp. A duffel. 2 canteens. A folded flag. Echo jumped into the passenger seat without command. His eyes still tracked every movement Creed made, loyal, alert, whole. Just before pulling away, Creed placed something in Ava's hands. Tran's original letter. "Your grandkids might need to know why you believed in something." Ava stared at it, eyes wide. "I'll keep it safe." "I know." The engine rumbled to life. Creed rolled down the window. "We'll be back." "For what?" she asked. "To see if the town still remembers." Their first stop was Nebraska. A retired Air Force tech sergeant hadn't seen his K-9, Sable, since Kandahar. Bureaucracy had buried the records. But Creed didn't ask permission. He walked into the holding compound with Echo beside him and left 20 minutes later with Sable reunited, tail wagging so hard it knocked over a metal chair. From there, Idaho. Then Texas. Then Georgia. At each stop, Creed spoke few words. Let the animals and their humans speak in silence. His presence alone seemed to unlock trust. Echo, ever his partner, learned to wait at the right moment, approach only when ready, and guide handlers back into their pasts without shame. At one reunion, a handler wept for 10 straight minutes without speaking. When she finally stood, she simply said, "I can breathe again." Creed didn't reply. He just nodded and moved on. By year's end, the program had expanded beyond expectation. Congress mentioned it briefly in a session. A bill was drafted, the Echo Act, seeking permanent retirement rights for service animals with their original handlers. The name wasn't Creed's idea. But he didn't stop it. Back in Meridian Bluff, the town had changed in small, lasting ways. The memorial became a place of stories. Veterans stopped hiding. Children listened. Ava started writing her first book, The Man and the Dog Who Remembered for Everyone. Creed sent postcards. One every month. Never signed. Just a photo, Echo in a field, Echo beside a flag, Echo curled beside a boy in a wheelchair. Each one captioned in block letters. He remembers. One summer evening, nearly a year later, the truck returned. Quiet, dusty, unchanged. Creed parked under the tree by the ridge. Echo leapt out, older but still fierce. They climbed the hill together. The stone still read brother. Creed sat beside it. Echo curled at his feet. This wasn't an ending. It was a return. A reminder. That some promises don't fade, they become the light that guides others home. Promises kept.